Welcome. Great to get a few minutes together. And if you don't know who I am, I'm Bruce Goddard at Faith Baptist Church in Wildomar, California. 39 years ago, my wife and I came to this little town. 1,000 people in Wildomar, 1,000 people in Murrieta. That's 8 miles or so, 6 miles to the south. And depending on what part, now it's grown to I don't know how many thousands. Temecula was 6 miles or so further south, and they had 10,000. To the north of us, Lake Elsinore, 10,000. There were about 22,000 people in the area when we moved here. And 39 years later, Wildomar's boomed up to 34,000, and the towns around us much, much larger than that. But in these years, just tell you a couple of things. We have had the best of friends, and we've had the blessings of God, and He's been so good to us. And if I started listing that, we came here, we had no children, we had no money, no children, and now that our kids are all grown, we're back at the no money, no children. But we were newlyweds, been married just about a year. And we came to a place we'd never been, started knocking on doors and meeting people, and God did what He wanted to do. We worked hard, we tried, but it was God who did the work. Yeah, it was God who made things happen. And like the Apostle Paul recently, I mentioned to somebody, Paul said, by the grace of God, I am what I am. But I labored more abundantly than they all. He worked hard. And I may not be able to control the outcome, but I can work awful hard at the income, at the input. And it's with God's help, and through the years, He's done wonderful things. Some of the best friends, the finest of people, God brought from other places. We knocked on doors and met people, but it's interesting the number of people from out of the area that God brought to serve by us and work together that we'd have never met them knocking on doors. We met lots of people knocking on doors, but we'd have never led these people to Christ. They were in other cities, and God brought them. And just God has been so good. And 39 years, blessing after blessing, and now our children are grown. They're all married, and God has been good. Now, I'll just throw this out. There's been some frustrating days along the way. There's been some big frustration. There's been some little ones. There's been some days when, you remember, Moses at one point, God said to Moses, let me alone. I'm going to kill them all. And Moses talked him out of it. And the other days, Moses said, you go ahead and kill them. It's all right. And people will frustrate us, and we'll frustrate people. And at times might be your spouse or your parents or your kids or whoever. But, we've got God. And I want to encourage you, don't become an atheist in your thinking. Don't become an atheist. Don't say, and I'll probably spend more time on this, but we have for some years had this, but recently much, much more, this push on us that we're all victims. We're victims because of our parents. We're victims because of the economy. We're victims because of our economics or whatever. We're a victim. And I get tired of that. You know what? I am blessed. I'm in America, and I'm saved, and I've got a Bible, and I've got a country where if I wanted to walk out of this church today and go start a hamburger stand, of course I am in California, it'd take me $100,000 in 9 months to a year of permit filling out, and maybe they'd let me consider getting a hamburger. But here in America, we have such liberty, and we have so many opportunities. And right now, I forget what it was, the number of millions of job openings there are, because people are laying around home, not working. They'd rather collect especially in California, they'd rather collect their COVID money. And I heard 2 employers recently say that people would come in and fill out the application, get the job, work a day or two, maybe a few days, and then they'd fill out the paperwork saying, I'm uncomfortable because of the COVID situation there, the lack of guarding or whatever, and then they go home. They get $600 a week for doing nothing. And the one store manager said that these are people who, if they'd have worked all the hours I gave them, she said they'd only be working 10, 15 hours a week, 20 hours a week. It's just a part-time job. But now they can go home, get $600 a week for doing nothing. Tell you, if my kid did that, they'd have to go find their own place to rent. That's called a leech. That is not right. We are not victims. We ought to work for what we get. And if a man doesn't work, he ought not eat. And it's a big, big mess in our country. But even in the mess our country's in, it's the best place in the world. And I'm so thankful for these 39 years and how God's been so good to me, my family, my parents, my siblings. I have been most blessed. And I just sit back sometimes and marvel at the goodness of God and the mercy of God. And I want to take a minute or two today and look at some scripture. And yes, the subject is there are frustrations. There are days it's beyond frustrating. There's days it's discouraging. There are days you don't know which way to go. There are days you wonder, like David said, where's God? Where is God in all this? And those times are so wearing on our heart and our soul. But could I tell you, he's a wonderful God, and you can trust him, and you can lean on him. Now, in the book of Jeremiah, I'm just going to look at a few highlights here. Jeremiah, of course, he's writing to backslidden Israel. He's telling them judgment's coming. You don't turn back to God real fast, you are in the biggest trouble you ever could get in. And of course, they didn't turn, and they ended up maybe a third of them dying, another third being carried away captive, and the other third left in poverty in the land. And just a mess for 70 years. And after the captivity, then under Ezra, Nehemiah, and Cyrus, they were led back to Israel to rebuild the temple and all under Zerubbabel. But this is the warning time still. They still had a chance. But I want you to notice in chapter 4, verse 22, he said, "For my people is foolish. They have not known me. They are sottish children and have none understanding. They are wise to do evil, but to do good they have no knowledge." Now, over in the book of Romans, we won't turn there. Paul says, "I would that you were wise concerning good and simple concerning evil." And that's a problem we've got today between media and movies and internet. All of us, adults as well as young people, but young people especially, they're learning too much filthy stuff. They're getting too familiar with evil. Even these cop shows, they are way too specific, and they way too much vile and corrupt and evil. And he says they're wise to do evil, but to do good they have no knowledge. And that's the accusation against the nation. You know all about the evil, but you're not smart enough to do the right thing. And then he goes over to chapter 5. He says, "Run you to and fro in the streets of Jerusalem, and see and know and seek in the broad places if you can find a man, if there be any." Now here he says, go look for a man, see if you can find any. And he lists, "that executeth judgment and that seeketh the truth, and I will pardon it." You find me a guy who seeks judgment and truth, and I'll pardon your whole country. Just show me a man. Show me somebody who's honestly seeking or executing judgment and seeking the truth. And but he couldn't find any. Verse 2, "and though they say the Lord liveth, they swear falsely." A lot of these people talk religious, but there's no real love and devotion for God. And then down in verse 5, I love this. He says, "I will get me to the great men, and will speak unto them, for they have known the way of the Lord and the judgment of their God." Well, there are the people you want to get to. You want to find. It goes along with verse 1. They know the way of the Lord and the judgment of their God. They know the way God wants us to do things, and they know the judgment of God. But these, and I'm in the bottom of the end of verse 5, these, talking about those people in verse 1, 2, and 3, and over in chapter 4, "these have altogether broken the yoke and burst the bonds." Now, they've broken the yoke and burst the bonds. I want you to think with me, look over to Psalms chapter 2. He said, there's some people who execute judgment, and I get the words mixed up. In verse 1, they execute judgment and seek the truth. But these, he says, have broken the bonds. Now, if you look over to Psalm chapter 2 with me, and you notice that to God is a serious accusation. To break the bonds, Now you might say, well, we ought not be bound. Well, that's what the world says. The world says, I don't want to be bound by gender. Don't call me him or her, call me they. And I heard this on the radio. I thought, they is a plural. Them is a plural. You can't call an individual they or them, or you're violating the most basic rules of English grammar. No individual is a they or a them. You're a she or a he. That's singular. Them is them folks over there. I won't go with them. That means there's not one, but that's a group. They left a while ago. That's more than one left. That's not an individual. But see, we have a society wanting to break the bonds of moral propriety that God set up. We have a society that doesn't want the idea of marriage. The word adultery is in the dictionary. It's been a part of the American life and vocabulary forever, ever since there's been an America. And yet we've got a society that wants to break the bonds of marriage, and you have to be married, and and a man and a woman getting married, and they want to break these old traditional bonds. Look over to Psalm chapter 2, verse 1. Why did the heathen rage and the people imagine a vain thing? So that these rulers and these heathen people, they're imagining vanity. And boy, don't we have a lot of that from our schools and universities. Verse 2, the kings of the earth have set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together. So we're talking about the political leaders. They take counsel together against the Lord and against his anointed. Now that word anointed in Hebrew and in Greek is the same word. It's the word Christ. When we talk about Jesus Christ, we're talking about Jesus the anointed, that God is anointed. Now, there's more than one Christ. In Isaiah 14 or Ezekiel 28, I forget which is which, Satan's called the anointed cherub that covereth. So the word anointed, so there are Christ, false Christs, 1 John writes about, and there is the Antichrist, but the Christ of God, that's in the book of Acts, Wednesday night Bible studies, the Christ of God, the anointed of God. But look at this, the kings in verse 2, the heathen in verse 1, the people imagine vain things in verse 2, the kings set themselves against the rulers, and they take counsel against the Lord and against his anointed, saying, look at verse 3 now, let us break their bands asunder and cast away their cords from us. Now that's the exact same thing that's going on in the day of Jeremiah. And Jeremiah is saying these people, they want to break these cords. They want to break the bonds of thou shalt not, and thou shalt not, and thou shalt not kill, and thou shalt not covet, and thou shalt not bear false witness. And you ever try to name all 10 commandments? It's harder than you think. You try sometime. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. Have no idols. Don't bow down before any idols or images. And you know, in this world says, if I want an idol, I'm going to break that bond, and I'll have any old idol I want. And if I want to have a statue to bow down before, that's my business. And if I want to smoke peyote and snort cocaine, and I want to do every kind of abominable thing, that's my right. And that the heathen are raging. And aren't our liberal politicians in a rage? You know, when I hear these big mouth liberals screaming and hollering, I think of this verse. I think, why do the heathen rage and the people imagine a vain thing? And why do we have to work? And we ought to be able to give people health care and money, give them checks without them having to work. Did it ever occur to anybody that someone's going to have to sooner or later start working to pay for this stuff? You don't have to be an economist to know that somebody's got to work to make the money to buy the stuff that the government wants to give away. And it doesn't work that way. Never has worked that way. It's going to create a nation of poverty. We've seen it in other countries. There's going to be hunger. There's going to be fighting. There's going to be just horrible anarchy. And then unless there's a revival, then there will be some political leader come along and say, oh, this fighting and stealing, there's not food, and it's a big mess, and the government's going to have to come in and take over. They're going to take over the food, they're going to take over the military and the law enforcement, and they're going to set up martial law, And then we're going to have Robin Hood days where a few of these rich elites are ruling us poor people, and we're going to be all on their land. They're going to take the land, they're going to take the businesses and run them right, as if the government has ever done anything right. But look at verse, I love this, and I don't want you to discourage. Look at this. Look down at verse 4. He that sitteth in the heavens shall laugh, and the Lord shall have them in derision. Then shall he speak unto them in his wrath, and vex them in his sore displeasure. Yet have I set my king upon my holy hill in Zion. Let me tell you this. There's a God in heaven, and when this whole world rages and throws their fits, God's up in heaven laughing. Look down there. See what I'm going to do? I am going to make this thing go this way and this way. And these people, now there may be some difficult days, but I promise you this, there's a God in heaven. And we get frustrated, and things go wrong, and things go astray, and there's injustice, and there's people who do this and that, and it is hard, and I understand that. Oh, but could I tell you something? We've got a great God, and he's got everything under control. And I'd love to say I have such faith that I'll never get frustrated again, but that would be stupid, because I'm spirit and I'm flesh, and I've got this old man. And there are days I get disgusted and I get bothered by things, and I speak out of turn, and there's days I fret when I ought not. But oh, we've got a great God, and you and I serve the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Yet have I set my King upon my holy hill. God says down there, verse 4, verse 5. He said, you guys can rage all you want, but I'm setting Jesus up as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Every one of you going to be on your face. Every knee's going to bow. Every tongue's going to confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. Philippians chapter 2 says, and it's going to be good. I can tell you that. Now, this fretting and worrying, let's trust him. The medical world has proven they're liars. And the FBI and DOJ and all that crowd, the IRS, they've proven themselves to be corrupt and rotten. And of course, Washington has proven itself a corrupt sewer, and of the worst kind, is spreading its sewage across the world. But you know what? We've got a Bible that tells us Jesus is Lord of all, and everything's going to be fine. And we can relax, and we can trust him. And Jeremiah there, we could go on and look at more of this thing, but he says back over there in Jeremiah 4:22, they're wise to do evil, but to do good they have no knowledge. It's funny to me, these people who think they know how to run the country, and they can't even figure out their gender, and they think they can tell everybody how to run their business, and they can't get their kids to stay off drugs. Oh, what a mess. What a mess. And it's a hurting world out there. And I mean, there's some pretty good Christian people who've got marriage trouble, money trouble, kid trouble. It's life. This is a dirty, old, vile, corrupt world. And a lot of us, we're paying to bring it into our house via the internet and all that kind of thing. But can I encourage you? Trust in the Lord. Rest in him. And just go to God. God says, go ahead and look through town. If you can find somebody that executes judgment and seeks the truth, I'll spare your country. And we're going to have to do some serious looking. I, for one, look around America. I see some pretty great people. And I see people in the political realm, a few. And I see some folks in the ministry and some good church folks from different churches around the country. I see some pretty good people. This COVID thing in California was pretty neat. It showed some people up who's going to man up and stand up and say, our God and our Bible runs us, not you, in the state of California. And they weren't all Baptists. In fact, there's a lot of the Baptists just cowered. And I thought, man, I love these guys. We may have a doctrinal difference here or there, but I love their grit and their tenacity. And there's some good people left in America. And I go to Jeremiah 5:1 and say, God, I think we've got some people who are trying to execute righteousness and trying to seek the truth. And God, would you pardon? I know there's some Christians who are just complete animals. They live just like the lost, and they may not be saved at all. I have no idea. But I believe there's some great people scattered across this land. And I think we can go to God and pray for our country, pray for mercy, pray for healing, and that God in his love and mercy would sustain us. I hope you have a great day. Take time to pray. Would you do that? We need time with God. Take time to pray and ask God's blessing on your family, on your church. I know people watch this that go to other churches. Pray for your pastor and his family. I guarantee the devil's got his sights on them. And pray for your leaders in your state capital and your federal government. And we need judges to stand up. You know, I've never been so disappointed in the things I loved the last couple of years. You You look at the old stories of the FBI, that one little bastion of decency and integrity and right. Remember the untouchables, some of you that are older in Chicago that came in to clean up all these people who are going to straighten out the corrupt police and all that. Now, I don't know who's going to straighten out who. They're all crooked. But we've got a God. That's who we've got. We've got a God who loves us. And our job is to love him, trust him. And I do hope you vote. And I do hope you pray for your country. I hope you walk straight, but keep your hope in him. He's faithful and he's good. God bless you. Have a great day.